When Grant and Lily Reynolds purchased the former home of Tom Hanks in Pacific Palisades, they believed they had found their dream house. A spacious, elegant mansion nestled in the rolling green hills of Los Angeles, it was the perfect escape from the chaos of the city. But soon, strange occurrences began to unravel the peaceful facade. At first, it was subtle. Objects would move overnight. A book Lily had left on the coffee table would be on the kitchen counter in the morning. Doors that were locked would be slightly ajar. Grant dismissed it as forgetfulness. But there was something undeniably off about the air in the house, as if it held the weight of unseen eyes watching. The first time they heard the laughter, it was barely more than a whisper. A light, childlike giggle drifting down the hallway at midnight. Lily sat up in bed, gripping the sheets. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Grant did. He got up, walking toward the source, the old study on the second floor, where Tom Hanks had once spent hours writing and reading. The room was empty, bathed in the pale glow of the street lamp outside. But the air smelled different, like old paper, coffee, and something faintly metallic. As weeks passed, the incidents grew bolder. A guest at a dinner party gasped as a wine glass slid an inch across the table on its own. Another night, Lily turned off all the lights before bed, only to wake up at 3 a.m. to find the entire house glowing. Every lamp, every chandelier, every recessed light was on. The final straw came on a stormy evening. Grant was working late in the study when he heard the unmistakable creak of footsteps behind him. Expecting to see Lily, he turned only to find the room empty. Then, in the reflection of the window, he saw it. A shadow standing in the doorway. By the time he spun around, it was gone. But the air was charged with something unseen, something that did not belong to them. Who or what was still lingering in Tom Hanks' old house? And why did it choose to reveal itself now? The next morning, Grant did not speak of what he had seen. He told himself it was exhaustion, a trick of the dim light against the polished wood of the study. But something had changed in the air of the house, as if the walls themselves had absorbed his fear and now exhaled it in slow, deliberate whispers. Lily, too, had begun to feel the weight of something unseen pressing against the edges of her awareness. She would pause in the middle of the hallway, heart pounding, convinced that someone had just brushed past her, though the air was still. The mirrors in the house became unsettling, not for what they reflected, but for what they almost did. Shadows that did not belong, angles of movement that did not match her own. One evening, as the sky outside darkened into the deep navy of a California dusk, she stood at the kitchen sink, rinsing a glass, her gaze drifting to the wide windows that overlooked the garden. The reflection of the house behind her was crisp in the glass. Grant in the hallway, moving toward the study, but just as she was about to turn away, something shifted. There, at the farthest end of the reflection, a figure. It stood at the base of the stairs, barely visible in the periphery of her sight. Not quite solid, not quite smoke. It lingered for only a moment before dissolving into the dimness. Lily whirled around, her breath caught in her throat. Nothing, only the empty staircase, the polished wooden steps gleaming faintly in the low light. That night, she told Grant. He listened in silence, his fingers tracing patterns into the grain of the dining table, eyes fixed on something unseen. Finally, he exhaled and said, "I saw something too, last night, in the study." They did not need to explain further. A new tension had settled over the house, stretching between them in unspoken understanding. Whatever was here, it was not content to remain in the background any longer. And then the laughter returned. This time it was not a whisper. It was clear, unmistakable, as if a child stood just behind them, unseen but undeniably present. A light, delighted giggle that rippled through the air and vanished before their minds could fully grasp its source. And then, from upstairs, a sound. A slow, deliberate creak of floorboards. One, then another, then silence. Grant and Lily sat frozen, their breaths shallow. The night pressed in around them, thick with something they could not name. And somewhere in the depths of the house, something waited. Something that had always been here. And now it was awake. The silence stretched, dense and heavy, swallowing every sound except for the muted ticking of the grandfather clock in the hallway. Each second seemed to drag, stretching into something unnatural, something that did not belong to the quiet of their home. Lily's fingers curled around the edge of the table, knuckles paling as she strained to listen. A draft brushed against her skin, not the cool, fleeting touch of an open window, but something deliberate. A presence, unseen but undeniable, shifting in the air. Grant swallowed hard. The study, the moving objects, the laughter, none of it felt like coincidence anymore. He forced himself to his feet, every muscle tense, the wooden floor creaking softly beneath his weight. His eyes flickered toward the staircase, its polished rail gleaming under the soft glow of the chandelier. The upper floor lay in shadow, its corners stretched into darkness deeper than the night outside. Then another sound, soft, distant, a rustling like fabric brushing against wood, came from the second floor. Lily's breath hitched. "Grant," she whispered, but her voice barely carried. He raised a hand, motioning for silence, his heart hammering against his ribs. One slow step forward, then another. The stairs loomed before him, each step an unspoken invitation, an unseen threshold he did not wish to cross. A shadow flickered at the top. Not a shape, not a form, just the briefest absence of light, something shifting just beyond the reach of the dim hallway sconces. Grant blinked, but it was gone, leaving only the empty landing. His foot touched the first stair. The wood groaned under his weight, a sound that seemed impossibly loud in the hush of the house. He felt Lily behind him, close but unmoving, her presence grounding him even as his instincts screamed at him to turn back. Step by step, he ascended, his fingers grazing the banister. The upstairs hallway stretched before him, lined with closed doors. The study, the guest rooms, the master bedroom. All silent, all waiting. A shiver crawled up his spine. He could feel it. Something was watching. Lily lingered at the base of the stairs, her breath shallow, her pulse thrumming in her ears. She wanted to call him back, to beg him not to go further, but the words clung to her throat, refusing to form. Instead, her eyes swept over the darkened corners of the house, the familiar walls that now felt foreign, unknowable. And then, without warning, a door creaked open upstairs. Slow, deliberate, the study. Grant's breath caught. He turned his head, pulse pounding in his ears. The door, which had been firmly shut when they'd gone to bed, now stood ajar, revealing only a sliver of the room beyond. Something moved inside. Not the scuttle of an animal, not the shift of furniture settling. This was different. A presence, unseen but palpable, its weight pressing against the stillness of the air. Lily clutched the banister. "Grant," she choked out, barely louder than a breath. His fingers curled into fists. He knew, with every fiber of his being, that he should not step forward, that something was waiting for him on the other side of that threshold. But then, the door swung wider, and from the darkness beyond, something exhaled. Long, slow, and knowing. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story. Grant stood motionless at the threshold, his breath shallow, every nerve in his body screaming for him to turn back. The door was now wide open, the darkness inside deeper than it should have been, thick like ink, swallowing the soft glow from the hallway. The air smelled different here, not just the old paper and faint coffee scent he had noticed before, but something else. Something damp, something ancient. The scent of forgotten things, of dust settling in untouched corners, of time stretching in silence. Lily was still downstairs, gripping the banister so tightly her fingers ached, her pulse thrumming in her ears. She could see Grant from where she stood, silhouetted against the dim hallway light, frozen at the entrance to the study. He had not moved, had not breathed in what felt like an eternity. And then, a whisper. Not words, not a voice, just the barest suggestion of sound, like wind through dry leaves, like fabric brushing against itself in an empty room, came from inside. Grant swallowed hard. His fingers hovered over the edge of the door, hesitating. The shadows inside the study did not shift, did not breathe. and yet he could feel them watching. Then movement. Something shifted at the farthest end of the room. He did not see it. Not clearly. Only the absence of light shifting against the deeper dark. The briefest flicker of motion in the corner of his vision. A presence, standing just beyond the veil of what his eyes could comprehend. The whisper came again, closer this time. His skin prickled, cold dread curling at the base of his spine. The floor creaked behind him. Not from the study. From the hallway. Slow. Deliberate. Grant stiffened, his pulse hammering against his ribs. He turned his head just slightly, just enough to glimpse the long stretch of hallway behind him, the doors lining the corridor. Empty. But the air had changed, thickening around him like a pressure he could not see. The silence was no longer empty, it was full, weighted with something unseen, something waiting. Lily's voice, barely more than a whisper, floated up from the base of the stairs. Grant! He could not answer, could not find his voice, because in that moment, in the heavy stillness of the house, he felt it. A breath, not his own, not Lily's, right behind him, warm and slow, exhaled against the back of his neck. His muscles locked, his throat tightening around a scream he could not release. And then, the study door slammed shut. The house exhaled, its unseen weight shifting, pressing, closing in. And somewhere, deep within the walls, the laughter returned. This time it was not distant. It was right there. The laughter slid through the air, wrapping around Grant like a slow, curling mist. It wasn't sharp or sudden, no shriek, no burst of sound. It was soft, drawn out, something teasing, something patient. A child's giggle, but stretched just slightly too long, just a shade too hollow, as if the walls themselves were exhaling it from deep within their bones. Grant's breath caught in his throat. He couldn't move, couldn't turn. The warmth against the back of his neck had faded, but something still lingered, something just beyond his line of sight. Downstairs, Lily had pressed herself against the railing, gripping the wood so tightly her nails threatened to splinter it. She could see only Grant's outline, still frozen at the top of the stairs, his body rigid. The slammed door had rattled the chandelier above her, making the crystals quiver with the echo. But the house had already settled back into silence. Not true silence. Listening silence. Then a sound. A faint tap. Then another. Footsteps. Light. Careful. Moving slowly down the hallway upstairs. Lily's stomach twisted. Grant, she breathed, her voice nearly lost in the stillness. He heard them too. The footsteps were not his, not hers. They did not belong to either of them. And yet, they were coming closer. Not hurried, not frantic, but unwavering. A steady rhythm, soft against the wooden floor. And then they stopped. Right behind him, a rush of cold air brushed his arm, featherlight, like something unseen had just moved past him. The hallway smelled different now, the faintest trace of something old, something sweet. Vanilla? No, candle wax. Grant's muscles locked. He wanted to turn, to see, to confirm there was nothing there, but somewhere deep in his gut he knew that if he turned now, he would see something that could not, should not be there. The silence stretched. Then, a voice, soft, close, right at his ear. Not yet. A whisper. So quiet, so delicate, like a secret being passed between two people in the dark. Then nothing. The air shifted. The heaviness lifted, just slightly, enough for Grant to stumble back, his pulse roaring in his ears. He turned too fast, too clumsy, crashing against the wall as he twisted to face whatever had been behind him. Nothing. The hallway was empty. The doors stood closed. But the study door, the one that had slammed, it was open again. Not wide, just a sliver. And inside, something was moving. Not footsteps, not a shuffle. A slow, dragging sound, as if something was being pulled across the wooden floor. Grant's breath hitched. The air in the hallway had turned heavy again, pressing against his skin. The house was waiting, watching. Then Lily gasped. Grant tore his eyes from the study, his heart slamming against his ribs as he turned to look down at her. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at the wall. His stomach dropped. There, just beyond the staircase, on the wallpaper that had been pristine when they moved in. A handprint. Not clear. Not fresh. Faded. Like it had been there for years. Hidden beneath the layers of paint and time, only now beginning to bleed through the surface. Lily's lips parted. Her face drained of color as she lifted a trembling hand. Another laugh echoed through the house. This time it wasn't soft. This time it was closer. Lily's breath came in shallow gasps. The handprint on the wall, it hadn't been there before. Not when they moved in. Not yesterday. Not even minutes ago. And yet, now it was here, emerging from beneath the wallpaper like something bleeding through from another time. Faint, smudged, but unmistakably human. She couldn't look away. Her hand hovered inches from it, her fingertips tingling with an awful, magnetic pull. Don't touch it. Don't touch it, but something deep inside her, something she couldn't explain, whispered that the moment she did, something would change. Grant moved first. He was already descending the stairs, too fast, nearly stumbling in his rush to reach her. The study door remained open behind him, but he didn't look back. "We're leaving," he said, voice low, firm. Lily nodded, still transfixed by the handprint. Grant grabbed her wrist, yanking her away from the wall. "Lily, now!" Something thumped upstairs. They both froze. It wasn't a creak. Not footsteps. A solid impact. Like something heavy had just fallen. No, had been dropped. Lily squeezed her eyes shut. "We shouldn't be here." Every inch of her body screamed it. Grant pulled her toward the front door, his grip tight, his breathing shallow. He reached for the lock. The lights went out. All of them. Every bulb. Every source of light extinguished in an instant, swallowing them in perfect, suffocating darkness. Lily choked back a scream. A whisper brushed against the air. Soft, playful, right beside her. "Stay." Lily bolted. She yanked the door handle, twisting, pulling, her heart hammering against her ribs. Locked. Locked. Why is it locked? They hadn't locked it. They never locked it from inside. Grant fumbled beside her, his hands moving over the deadbolt. The knob, the wood, nothing moved. A shuffling sound drifted down from the second floor. Not a step. Not breathing. Something dragging. Closer. Lily clutched Grant's sleeve. "We have to go." Then something brushed her shoulder. Light. Barely there. A touch. Small fingers. Cold as ice. She screamed. The hallway behind them exhaled. The laughter returned. But this time, it wasn't alone. There were many. The laughter rose, swelling through the house, multiplying. Not one voice now, many. Some light and playful, others breathy and low, all twisting together into a chorus of amusement that did not belong to the living. Lily clutched Grant's arm, her nails digging into his skin, her breaths coming too fast, too shallow. The deadbolt wouldn't move. The knob was rigid beneath their frantic hands. The door refusing to give even an inch. Behind them, something shifted. Not footsteps. Not a breath. Something pressing against the air itself. A weight. Presence. Something close. Lily felt it before she heard it. The slow drag of something against the floorboards. The sound slithered from the staircase, creeping toward them. Then, a thud. A single, heavy step. Lily's body locked. She did not turn. Could not turn. Grant did. And what he saw. The breath left his body in a violent shudder. A figure stood at the bottom of the stairs. Not a shadow. Not a flicker. Something real. Something wrong. The dim glow from the streetlights outside cut through the windows, spilling faint silver light into the house, illuminating the figure in pale slashes. It was tall. Its limbs too long. Its shape stretched, its body swaying slightly, ever so slightly as if shifting in an unseen breeze. But the face. No, there was no face, no eyes, no mouth, no human expression. Only smooth, featureless skin, pale as candle wax, curving where a face should be. And yet Grant could feel it looking at him, tilted its head, a motion so slow, so deliberate, that it sent ice through his veins. Then, it stepped forward. A deep creak from the floor. The house inhaled. The laughter stopped. And in that perfect silence, Grant understood. It was never the laughter they should have feared. It had only been the invitation. Now the thing had come, and it was waiting. For what? For them to see it? For them to scream? Lily's breath was hot against his arm. She hadn't turned yet. She hadn't seen. But she would. She would feel it. The thing took another step. A slow, dragging step, its movement almost leisurely, as if it had all the time in the world. The door was still locked. No way out. Grant's mind raced. He could hear his own pulse, feel the sweat on his skin going cold. The thing was close now. He could see the light catch the surface of its skin, smooth and stretched too tight, as if something had been pulled over a skull that was not quite human. His hand found Lily's. He squeezed. Hard. "Don't look," he breathed. A whisper, barely a sound. She stiffened. And in that moment, the thing moved. Not a step. Not a shift. It rushed. A blur of white. A flicker of motion so fast it was almost unseen. And then, the lights came back. A sharp hum. A sudden glow. Lily's breath hitched. The room was normal again. Empty. The hallway stretched ahead. Untouched. The staircase loomed. Silent. The walls held only stillness. The laughter was gone. And so was it. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, a soft click. Grant turned slowly. The deadbolt had unlocked itself. Lily's fingers shook as she reached out, her pulse hammering so hard she thought she might black out. She twisted the knob. The door swung open. Cold night air rushed in, curling around them like unseen hands urging them out. They did not hesitate, did not look back. They stepped over the threshold, the weight of the house falling away behind them. And as they did, the door swung shut on its own. A final whisper, slipping through the gap before it closed. Next time, the latch clicked. The house stood in silence, waiting for whoever came next. Don't forget to subscribe and like if you liked this story.